Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked loudly in the quiet house as I turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open. The usual warmth of home was replaced by an uneasy chill, and I was immediately struck by a sense that something was off. "Luna?" I called out, stepping inside. My voice echoed through the empty hallway. I kicked off my shoes and walked towards the living room, the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. That's when I saw her. Luna was sitting on the couch, her posture slouched and her eyes glued to the floor. Her normally impeccable appearance was in stark contrast to the disheveled state she was in now. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her clothes looked like they had been hastily thrown on. "Hey," I said gently, trying to mask the concern in my voice. "You okay? You look distressed." Luna looked up, her eyes rimmed with red and her expression a mix of exhaustion and anxiety. "Jack," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry I'm late. I didn't expect you home this early." I took a seat beside her, placing a hand on her knee. "What's going on? You seem really upset. Did something happen at work?" She hesitated, her fingers nervously twisting a strand of her hair. "It's not just work. It's Ralph." My heart sank. Ralph was Luna's boss, a man who had always seemed overly authoritative in our conversations about work. "Ralph? What about him?" Luna took a deep breath, as if steeling herself to reveal something deeply troubling. "He's been dominating me. Not just at work, but in other ways too. And he's asked to speak with us tonight." I frowned, trying to process her words. "Dominating you? What does that mean, exactly?" Luna's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of shame in them. "It means he's been taking control of more than just my professional life. He's been involved with me in ways I didn't anticipate. And now he wants to discuss our relationship." I felt a wave of anger and confusion. "Discuss our relationship? What does he have to do with us?" Luna's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know. But it feels like everything's been turned upside down. I didn't know how to tell you." I sat there, trying to absorb her words. The room felt smaller, the weight of what she'd said pressing down on me. "So, what are we supposed to do now?" Luna's gaze dropped again, her voice trembling. "He's waiting for us to talk. I thought it would be better if you knew before we meet him. I didn't want you to hear it from him." I stood up, pacing the room. "This is a lot to take in. I mean, Ralph. What kind of hold does he have on you?" Luna stood as well, coming to stand close beside me. Her eyes were pleading. "Jack, I know this is hard to understand. I just need you to trust me, even if it's difficult right now. We need to handle this together." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling overwhelmed. "Okay. We'll talk to him. But I need you to be honest with me about everything. I can't deal with any more surprises." Luna nodded, her expression softening. "I promise. I'll explain everything when we meet him." As we prepared to face whatever was coming, the quiet of the house seemed to amplify the tension between us. The thought of confronting Ralph and uncovering more of what was hidden beneath the surface was daunting, but I knew that whatever lay ahead, we had to face it together. The hours passed slowly as we sat in the dimly lit living room, the only sounds the ticking of the clock and our uneasy breathing. Luna had been quiet since our conversation, her thoughts evidently tangled in a web of her own making. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice a fragile whisper. "Jack, there's something else I need to tell you," she said, her hands nervously clasped in her lap. She avoided looking directly at me, as if fearing what my reaction might be. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What is it, Luna? You can tell me." Luna took a deep breath, her shoulders trembling slightly. "It's about Ralph. There's more to the story than just him being overbearing at work." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What do you mean? She looked up, her eyes full of a mixture of apprehension and determination. Ralph has been seducing me, Jack. It started with small things, comments, touches that were more personal than professional. And I let it happen. I blinked, stunned. You let it happen? Luna, how could you? Her voice cracked as she spoke. I didn't plan for it to happen. I was confused, and he manipulated me into thinking it was okay. And now, I've been having these fantasies about him. I sat back, my mind reeling. So, you're saying that not only has he been crossing boundaries, but you've also been thinking about him in a way that goes beyond work? Luna nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Yes. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't know how to handle it, and now I'm afraid of what's happening between us. I ran a hand over my face, trying to process her confession. What do you want from me, Luna? What are you asking? She took another deep breath, her hands gripping the edges of the couch. I think we need to try something different in our relationship. I want you to be submissive, and I want Ralph to dominate me. The suggestion hung in the air like a heavy fog. I stared at her, unable to fully grasp what she was proposing. Submissive? You want me to just give up control? And you want Ralph to take over? Luna nodded, her voice barely audible. I know it sounds extreme. But I feel like this is something I need to explore, to understand what's happening inside me. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Luna, this isn't just about exploring fantasies. This is about changing the fundamental dynamics of our relationship. Luna rose from the couch, walking over to me. I know it's a lot to ask. But I'm desperate, Jack. I don't know how to fix this on my own. I looked at her, my frustration giving way to a deep sadness. I'm trying to understand, but this is so out of left field. I don't know if I can just switch roles like that. Luna's eyes were pleading. Please, just consider it. I need to figure out what I truly want and where we stand. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to keep pretending that everything's okay when it isn't. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her request. All right. We'll meet with Ralph and talk about this. But I need you to be honest with me about everything. No more secrets. Luna nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Jack. I know it's not easy, but I appreciate you being willing to try. As we prepared for the difficult conversation ahead, the gravity of the situation sank in. Our relationship was at a crossroads, and how we navigated this next chapter would determine the future of our lives together. The night air was thick with tension as I left the apartment, each step toward Ralph's car feeling heavier than the last. I could barely contain my rage, my mind a turbulent storm of betrayal and anger. Ralph's car, parked under a streetlight, looked like an innocent object but had become the focal point of my fury. I saw him standing beside his car, casually leaning against it with an air of self-satisfaction. The sight of him made my blood boil. Without a word, I charged at him, my fists clenched. Ralph looked up, his casual demeanor shifting to one of confusion and then fear as he saw my approach. Jack, what? I didn't give him a chance to finish. I swung a punch that landed squarely on his jaw. Ralph stumbled, his eyes wide with shock. He tried to defend himself, but I was relentless. Each punch I threw was fueled by the betrayal and anger I felt. How dare you? I shouted, my voice cracking with fury. How dare you mess with my life and my wife? Ralph tried to back away, but I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against his car. You think you can just walk in and control everything? This is what happens when you cross the line. Jack, stop. Ralph gasped, his voice pleading. I didn't mean for this. I didn't let him finish. My rage had a life of its own, and I turned my attention to his car. I started smashing the windows, each shatter echoing my anger. Ralph's attempts to stop me were weak, his protests lost in the cacophony of destruction. Finally, I stepped back, panting heavily. The car was a wreck, its once pristine surface now marred by dents and broken glass. Ralph, shaken and disheveled, stood a few feet away, his eyes darting between me and his damaged vehicle. "You stay away from my wife," I warned, my voice low and menacing. "If you report this to the police, I will make sure you regret it." Ralph, clearly terrified, nodded vigorously. "I won't report it. I just want this to be over." I glared at him one last time before turning away, leaving him standing there with his ruined car and shattered composure. The night was still, the echoes of my anger slowly fading as I walked back toward the apartment. When I returned home, the adrenaline was beginning to wane, leaving me with a profound sense of emptiness. Luna was waiting, her face a mixture of concern and apprehension. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling as she saw the look on my face. I confronted Ralph," I said, my voice hollow. "I let my anger get the better of me. His car's a mess, and I threatened him." Luna's eyes widened with worry. "Jack, what have you done?" I sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of my actions settle heavily on my shoulders. I didn't know what else to do. I felt like I was losing control. Luna sat beside me, her hand reaching out to touch mine. "I understand you're angry, but this isn't the way to handle it. We need to figure out how to move forward, not just lash out." I looked at her, the anger in me slowly giving way to regret. I know. I went too far. But I just couldn't handle the betrayal. Luna nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. "We both need to take a step back and think about what's next. There's still a lot we need to talk about and work through." As the reality of what had happened began to sink in, I realized that the confrontation with Ralph had only added to the chaos. We needed to face the issues in our relationship with a clear head, and that meant finding a way to address everything without letting anger dictate our actions. The next morning brought a somber clarity that had been missing in the heat of the night. The apartment was eerily quiet as I sat in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee growing more bitter with each passing minute. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a gnawing sense of regret and confusion. Luna joined me at the table, her eyes swollen from a night of restless sleep and tears. She looked tired, her gaze distant. She sat down across from me, her expression a mix of sadness and determination. "Jack, we need to talk about what happened," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I know. I've been thinking about it all night. I shouldn't have reacted the way I did. I let my anger take over, and now I feel like I've made things worse." Luna reached out and took my hand, her touch a small comfort in the midst of the turmoil. "It was a terrible situation, but violence wasn't the answer. Ralph's terrified, and I've learned he's been fabricating a story to cover his own actions. He's been manipulating us both." I looked at her, my heart sinking further. "So he's lying to save himself?" I should have known. I let him provoke me into making things worse. Luna squeezed my hand. "I understand why you were so angry. But we need to find a way to address this that doesn't involve more damage. We have to focus on our relationship, not just the fallout with Ralph." I sighed, feeling the weight of the previous night's actions. "You're right. I've been so consumed by what he did that I didn't stop to think about how we could actually fix things between us." Luna nodded, her expression softening. "I'm sorry too, Jack. I never meant for any of this to spiral out of control. I was confused and didn't handle things well. I want us to work through this, but we need to be honest with each other and set clear boundaries." I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. "I want that too. But we need to take things slowly. We need to talk about what we both want and how we can rebuild trust." Luna took a deep breath. "I think we should start by setting up a meeting with Ralph to clear things up. We need to make sure he understands that his manipulative behavior won't be tolerated and that we're taking control of our own lives. I nodded, feeling a sense of resolve. That sounds like a good plan. We need to reclaim our space and address this mess head-on. It's going to be tough, but if we face it together, we might find a way through. Luna's eyes were filled with gratitude. Thank you for being willing to work through this with me. I know it's not easy, but I believe we can get through it. As the day progressed, we began making plans to meet with Ralph. The sense of impending confrontation was daunting, but it also felt necessary. The damage done was significant, but facing it and addressing the root causes was the only way forward. The aftermath of the night's events had left us both shaken, but it also brought a clarity that we desperately needed. We were at a crossroads, and how we chose to navigate this turbulent path would determine the future of our relationship. Together, we would face the challenges ahead and strive to rebuild what had been broken.